Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR official 24 channel. GENOA and SIENNA'S fates were sealed in a blaze of fire and terror. The room, once a place of whispered secrets and fragile alliances, transformed into an inferno of crackling destruction. The heat so intense it made the air shimmer and distorted the faces of those caught on the edge of the nightmare. While Matt, standing with a twisted mix of defiance and despair etched into his features, felt a strange calm as he watched the flames snake along the walls, devouring furniture, burning documents that held the key to countless betrayals, and reducing years of fragile memories to smoke and ash, and the smell of charred wood and melted fabric filled every corner, mixing with the acrid scent of panic as the fire roared louder than the screams that erupted from anyone who dared to look too closely, and the city beyond the windows seemed oblivious. The streets quiet as though Genoa City itself were holding its breath in morbid anticipation, while inside, GENOA and SIENNA were trapped in the epicenter, their attempts to flee futile against the walls of roaring flame, their faces etched with shock and disbelief, eyes wide as they realized the finality of Matt's action, hands reaching out instinctively for each other in a futile gesture of comfort, voices lost in the overwhelming roar, hearts pounding, lungs searing from the smoke that wrapped around them like a merciless shroud, and even as the fire consumed them, time seemed to slow, capturing every flicker of terror, every flash of light reflecting off the melting chandeliers, every whisper of ash as it drifted lazily to the floor, coating everything in a soft, ghostly gray, and the irony of Matt's last words, cryptic, heavy with intent, hung in the air like a sinister echo, because no one, not even he, could have imagined how devastatingly final they would be, how their simple cadence would precede an apocalypse contained within a single room. And as the inferno claimed every trace of life and laughter, the fire's roar became almost sentient, a living entity that seemed to celebrate the culmination of betrayal, revenge, and heartbreak, and the walls themselves groaned under the heat, paint blistering, wallpaper curling and cracking as if protesting the violence wrought upon them, while Matt, almost reverently, watched as decades of accumulated secrets, alliances, and misdeeds literally went up in smoke, the very essence of his torment, his obsession, reduced to embers that floated on currents of heat toward the ceiling. And outside, the first responders arrived, alerted by frantic calls from neighbors whose screams barely cut through the cacophony of chaos inside. Yet they were too late to save GENOA and SIENNA, their heroic efforts stymied by the intensity of the flames and the cruel timing of the arson. And as they fought to breach the inferno, the fire twisted and danced unpredictably, almost taunting them, striking down with sudden gusts and collapsing beams, making each attempt to reach the trapped victims feel like a hopeless struggle against an elemental wrath. And as the room structure began to fail, sending showers of sparks and embers outward, Matt's figure became almost ghost-like, silhouetted against the blaze, his eyes reflecting the fire, emotions impossible to parse, rage, relief, sorrow, triumph, all tangled in a final, grim tableau that would haunt survivors for years to come. And in the aftermath, when the fire finally succumbed to the efforts of the firefighters, the room was unrecognizable, an apocalyptic landscape of blackened wood, twisted metal, and powdered ash, with no trace of GENOA and SIENNA save for the faint outlines left where their bodies had once been, leaving behind questions that would echo throughout Genoa City. How could Matt have gone this far? What drove him to utter those fateful 3 words that became the prelude to such horror? Who else might have been implicated in the chain of events that led to this monstrous act? And in the quiet moments that followed, as investigators combed through the wreckage, piecing together the story from burned fragments, charred photographs, and the remnants of Matt's cryptic messages, a chilling realization settled over everyone involved. Matt's act was not just vengeance, it was a statement, a terrifying declaration that in Genoa City, the line between obsession and madness is perilously thin, and that even the closest bonds can be reduced to ashes in an instant, leaving nothing but questions, guilt, and the searing memory of fire that took 2 innocent lives in the blink of an eye. And as the city slowly tried to return to its routines, The story of that night spread like wildfire, whispered from office to office, cafe to cafe, each retelling more exaggerated, more haunted than the last, until Matt's last 3 words, the catalyst of unimaginable destruction, became legend, a warning etched into the collective memory of Genoa City, reminding everyone that even in a place of glamour and ambition, darkness lurks in the corners, ready to ignite at the slightest spark, and that the human heart, with all its fragility, anger, and desire, can, when pushed to the edge, commit acts of such irreversible horror that nothing, not even love, loyalty, or hope, can survive untouched. The aftermath of the fire was a scene of total devastation, the kind that left even seasoned Genoa City first responders momentarily stunned, their uniforms streaked with soot, eyes watering from the acrid smoke that still clung stubbornly to the air, while the streets outside were littered with debris that had been hurled from the building in the collapse, shards of glass glittering like cruel jewels on the asphalt, and the smell of burned wood, plastic, and human fear hung over the neighborhood like a tangible, suffocating fog, pressing down on everyone in its path. Crowds had gathered, drawn by the sirens and the flames, their faces pale, mouths open in silent horror as news spread that Noah and Sienna, the beloved, vibrant hearts of Genoa City, had been lost in a fire that seemed almost otherworldly in its ferocity, and as whispers traveled from person to person, a deep, gnawing fear began to settle over the community. If Matt could do something like this, if he could reduce 2 lives to ashes without hesitation, then no one was truly safe, not even those who thought they were untouchable in their wealth or power. Inside the ruins, investigators moved like ghosts, careful to avoid the unstable structure that groaned and hissed, sending occasional clouds of smoke spiraling into the air, their flashlights cutting through the darkness and highlighting charred remnants of furniture, twisted metal, and paper reduced to illegible fragments, the weight of tragedy hanging over each careful step. The fire marshal's voice was grim as he recounted what little could be definitively concluded. Accelerants had been used, the pattern of burn indicated a deliberate act, and while Matt had vanished, leaving behind only the echoes of his last 3 words, the evidence suggested premeditation, a meticulous cruelty designed to ensure maximum destruction, leaving behind nothing but scorched memories and the faint, lingering outlines of those who could no longer tell their story. The investigators moved slowly, every crack in the floor a potential hazard, every collapsed beam a reminder of the violence that had occurred, yet even in their professional detachment, there was an unmistakable horror in their eyes. They had seen fires before, but few had ever felt the weight of human intent as palpably as this one, the sense that the fire itself had been a weapon wielded with malice, precision, and the cold satisfaction of someone who believed the world owed them a reckoning. Meanwhile, news of the tragedy rippled through Genoa City like wildfire, reaching the ears of Victor Newman almost immediately. His reaction was instantaneous and explosive. Rage, disbelief, and grief collided in a storm of emotion that left his usually composed demeanor shattered. "Matt, that son of a," he roared, fists slamming into the leather of his office chair, knocking over papers and sending his assistant scrambling to pick them up before they scattered. The very idea that Noah and Sienna, 2 of the most loyal and genuinely good people he had ever known, could be destroyed in such a brutal, calculated act shook him to his core. Victor's mind raced, running through every possible scenario, every interaction he had had with Matt in recent months, trying to find a clue, a sign, anything that could have foreshadowed this unthinkable violence. But nothing fit. Matt's actions seemed like a divergence from reason, a leap into madness that defied logic, and yet the cold, deliberate nature of the fire told him otherwise. Matt had thought this through. He had planned it, and he had executed it with a precision that was terrifying. At Newman Enterprises, Chelsea confronted Victor hours later, her face pale, her usual composure fractured. "Victor, it's worse than we thought," she said, voice trembling. "The fire, they're saying Noah and Sienna didn't make it. Matt, he did this. He planned it." Victor's hands tightened into fists, knuckles white, and for a long moment, neither spoke, the weight of grief and rage pressing down like a physical force. Chelsea's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking as she added, "Everyone's scared, Victor. Genoa City, it feels like the world's ending. Matt's gone, and we have no idea where he is. We can't protect anyone if he's still out there." Victor's jaw tightened, and he finally spoke, low and deadly. "Then we make sure he pays for every second of terror he's caused. No one touches my family or my city and walks away." Chelsea nodded, tears streaming down her face, and in that moment, Victor Newman became a man singularly focused on vengeance, a predator unleashed, his mind already calculating every possible way to track Matt down, anticipate his moves, and exact retribution. Back at the scene of the fire, Genoa City Police had cordoned off the area, flashing lights illuminating the night sky as reporters crowded for every scrap of information. Families huddled together, some in disbelief, others openly weeping, while the investigators worked methodically, combing through ashes for clues, documenting every charred object, and piecing together the terrifying story. Among the responders, there was talk of Matt's final words, repeated over and over, each retelling adding a layer of almost mythical horror to the narrative. 3 simple words, carrying a weight that no one could comprehend fully, a prelude to annihilation that left the city shaken to its core. Social media exploded as well. Videos and photos from neighbors capturing the inferno went viral within hours, comments ranging from grief-stricken condolences to terrified speculation about Matt's motives and whereabouts, turning the tragedy into a spectacle that no one could ignore, forcing Genoa City to confront the uncomfortable truth that danger could lurk behind any door, even in the homes and offices of the seemingly untouchable. In the weeks that followed, the psychological fallout from the fire was nearly as devastating as the physical destruction. Genoa City seemed haunted, residents jumping at every unexpected sound, children wary of enclosed spaces, and parents clutching their loved ones a little tighter, as if fear itself had been imprinted on their collective consciousness. Therapists reported an uptick in anxiety cases, while support groups formed to help those struggling to process the trauma, and everywhere the shadow of Matt's actions loomed, a grim reminder that tragedy could strike without warning and that vengeance, once unleashed, was almost impossible to contain. Friends and family of Noah and Sienna gathered to mourn, but even in grief, the questions persisted. Why Matt? What had driven him to such extremes? And most terrifyingly, where was he now? The uncertainty gnawed at everyone, leaving them with a lingering sense of dread that no words of comfort could dispel. Even those who were removed from the immediate tragedy could not escape the ripple effects. Jack Abbott, a man who prided himself on control and foresight, felt the tremor of fear run through him as he processed the news. He had known Matt, had seen glimpses of his volatility, but nothing had suggested the scale of destruction he was capable of. Jack's thoughts turned to his own family, to the people he loved, and a chilling realization struck him. If someone like Matt could cause this much devastation, anyone could. His mind raced with contingencies, plans, and strategies, each more desperate than the last, as he realized the city's fragile veneer of safety had been shattered, and it would take more than mere vigilance to repair the damage. Meanwhile, the media's coverage of the fire took on a life of its own. Headlines screamed of Matt's Inferno and Genoa City Nightmare, and talk shows dissected every angle, speculating endlessly about motives, potential accomplices, and the psychological profile of a man capable of such cruelty. Public fear escalated, with citizens demanding answers, security measures, and accountability, while investigators continued their painstaking work, combing through the ashes for clues, reconstructing the scene, and tracing every lead that might bring Matt to justice. Each fragment of evidence, each burned photograph, each scorched diary page became a crucial piece in the puzzle, the painstaking reconstruction of a nightmare that had altered the city forever. Amid the chaos, whispers began to circulate about Matt's possible next moves. Some speculated he would strike again, emboldened by the destruction he had caused. Others feared he had disappeared into the shadows, waiting, watching, planning his next act of terror. Every unexpected noise, every shadow in an alley, became a potential harbinger of danger, and Genoa city residents found themselves looking over their shoulders in ways they never had before. Fear had seeped into every corner of the city, making neighbors suspicious of one another, straining relationships, and leaving an indelible mark on the community's psyche. And yet, in the midst of tragedy, bonds were forged as well. Those who had lost loved ones came together, leaning on each other for support, sharing grief, and building a fragile network of resilience in the face of overwhelming loss. Stories of heroism emerged, of firefighters and neighbors risking their lives to save others, even when the odds were overwhelmingly against them, and these acts of courage became a counterpoint to the horror. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, humanity could shine, albeit fleetingly. As the city struggled to rebuild physically and emotionally, the search for Matt intensified. Every lead was followed, every tip investigated, and every connection scrutinized, as law enforcement, Victor Newman, and others with personal stakes in the matter sought to bring the man responsible to justice. The pursuit became almost obsessive, a cat-and-mouse game where the stakes were not just legal or personal, but existential. Capturing Matt meant restoring a sense of order and safety. Failing meant risking further chaos and loss. And through it all, Matt's shadow loomed. Though unseen, he was felt everywhere, a ghostly presence that haunted conversations, media reports, and the memories of those who had survived. His last 3 words, uttered before the flames, had become a chilling refrain, a symbol of the fragility of life and the terrifying power of a single person driven by obsession, anger, and the belief that destruction could somehow satisfy his need for control. In the days following the fire, Genoa City felt hollow, as if the tragedy had hollowed out the very soul of the town. Shops reopened, offices resumed their routines, but there was an unshakable tension, a collective awareness that the city had changed forever. The whispers of Matt's last 3 words still lingered in every conversation, and in every shadow, people imagined him watching, waiting, a phantom of destruction ready to strike again. Victor Newman, now consumed by a singular focus, began coordinating with law enforcement and private investigators alike, his normally unshakable confidence replaced by a frantic urgency. He held late-night strategy meetings at Newman Enterprises, walls lined with maps, notes, and photographs from the fire scene, each pinned reminder a pulse of anger that seemed to radiate from the room. Chelsea stayed close, a calming presence against his fury, but even she could not fully temper the storm within him, and at night, Victor's sleep was haunted by visions of the flames, the faces of Noah and Sienna, and the cruel smile Matt had worn before disappearing into the chaos. Meanwhile, the city's media circus only intensified the tension. Every news outlet ran repeated coverage of the fire, analyzing Matt's motives, speculating on where he could have gone, and interviewing neighbors who had witnessed the inferno. Social media became a battlefield of fear, conspiracy, and speculation, with posts ranging from theories about Matt's next target to heartbreaking tributes to Noah and Sienna. The city seemed to vibrate with unease. No one could walk a street, enter a building, or even check their mail without imagining the possibility that Matt could strike again. Even those who had been on the periphery of the tragedy felt the psychological weight pressing down. A reminder that the fire had not just taken lives, it had ignited a pervasive, citywide fear that would not easily burn out. Jack Abbott, recognizing the growing hysteria, began calling meetings with allies and adversaries alike. The fire had proven that personal grudges could escalate into unimaginable violence, and in this new reality, he realized that past rivalries and old wounds would have to be set aside, or exploited, to ensure the safety of the people he cared about. Meanwhile, whispers of Matt's whereabouts persisted, some claiming he had fled the state entirely, others insisting he was still in Genoa City, blending into the crowd, biding his time. Each lead was followed, each tip investigated, but Matt remained a ghost, untouchable and terrifying in his unpredictability. And through it all, a chilling truth hung in the air. Matt's act had changed the rules of the game. In Genoa City, no one could assume safety, and even the strongest, most cunning individuals now felt vulnerable. The fire had left scars deeper than any physical wound. It had etched fear into the very fabric of the city, a constant reminder that destruction could come from the most unexpected places, and that vengeance, once unleashed, could reshape lives forever.